Shalom, Mashpaka, greetings to you in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach. To all the 12 tribes who are scattered to the ends of the earth. Uh, this morning, I would like to touch base upon part 2 of what I shared yesterday, the YashaYahu, that is Isaiah 53 verses 8, the collective reading versus the representative reading. All right, and I will set the context over here. uh, right, there are various verses from Isaiah where they are called as Isaiah songs. Okay, because Isaiah made a prophecy about the Babylonian captivity, which was soon coming. All right, much before even Yahudah went into captivity. So the book of Isaiah stands at a turning point in the history of Yahudah, politically, spiritually, and prophetically, written during the decline of the monarchy and the rise of foreign domination. So it speaks into a moment where the nation, its kings, and its future all stood under tension. So, within this setting, Isaiah introduces a series of passages that describe a servant of Yahuah. These texts have long been read in different ways, and the discussion around them has continued for centuries. So, before drawing conclusions, it is necessary to step back and allow the text to speak its own historical and grammatical setting. Only by tracing the development of the servant theme from beginning to end can we understand what the prophet is actually presenting. So, this is exactly what I'm going to do in this study. Right? So before drawing any conclusion, take a step back, allow the text to speak on its own. All right, both its historical and grammatical setting. So, let's have a quick look at the historical background of the book of Isaiah, the anchor verse being Isaiah 1 verses 1, which says the vision of Isaiah son of Amoz, which he saw concerning Yahudah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Yahudah. All right, the Hebrew says, Chazon YashaYahu ben Amoz asher ha-za al Yehuda ve Yerushalayim bimei Uziyahu, Yotham, Achaz, Yekiz, Yahu, Malki, Yahudah. All right, so this establishes that Isaiah prophesied across four reigns. So, what are the four reigns of Isaiah's ministry? Is he prophesied during the days of Uzziyahu or Uzziah, Yotham, Achaz, and Chizkiyahu or Hezekiah. So, this period marks the decline of Yahudah's independence and the rise of foreign domination. So, the turning point is the death of Uzziah or Uzziyahu. All right, so remember, he was a leper. He tried to offer the incense offering, and as a result, Yahuah struck him with leprosy, and he was isolated, and he ruled in isolation for the rest of his life. And eventually, he died. Though he was a righteous king, he was lifted up in pride. So uh, the turning point was his death, because here Isaiah mentions that in chapter 6 verses 1, that in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Adon sitting on a throne high and lifted up. So the historical significance is Uzziah's death marked the end of a long stable reign. Politically, Yahudah began to weaken after this point. Spiritually, Isaiah's vision shows a transition of focus. The earthly king dies, the heavenly king is revealed. This becomes a major theological theme of Isaiah. Human monarchy declines, divine kingship rises. So, if you look at the contextual verses of Isaiah chapter 6, all right, it talks about Yahuah high and lifted up, his train filled the temple, and Isaiah saw the seraphims crying, Kodesh, Kodesh, Kodesh. All right, I'll just quickly look at one more verse, where I just was reminded, John, I think chapter 12, verses, I need to just check it. Yes, here it is. Okay, look at this. This is the verse. okay, in which Isaiah speaks about in chapter 6, all right, where uh, you know, he notes down that he has blinded their eyes and hardened their heart so that they should not see with their eyes and understand with their heart and turn and I should heal them. All right, YashaYahu said this when he saw his esteem and spoke of him. So, John over here in John chapter 12, verses 40 and 41, is saying that Isaiah saw Yahushua HaMashiach, all right, in a glorified state and spoke of him. Okay, and I'll turn to the Isaiah passages over here, Isaiah chapter 6. All right, it says here, in the year that King sovereign Uzziah who died, I saw Yahuah sitting on the throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above it stood the seraphim, each had 6 wings, with 2 he covered his face, and 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one cried to another, saying, set apart, set apart, set apart is Yahuwah Sabaoth, all the earth is filled with his esteem. And then we read about, come down and we read about the commission, okay, and it says over here, make the heart, verse 10, make the heart of this people fat and their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart, and shall turn and be healed. The very same verses quoted by John, and tying the one whom Isaiah saw was Yahusha when he saw his esteem and spoke about him. So this is the turning point, all right, because I'll just also let you know about the historical background of the kings. If you remember, uh, you know the entire period there was no king. Okay, it was Yasharel who demanded a king in the days of Samuel. They said, we want a king who would fight our battles, who would govern over us, and or who would have military officers. And so Samuel was very disappointed, and he took this matter to Yahuah, and Yahuah said that, all right, give them a king. All right, and obviously we saw, then we come to the kings, we see both a mix of the evil kings and the righteous kings, and it's always going down in a decline. All right, it always went in a decline. And this is where this then vision comes, because Uzziyahu was a righteous king but lifted up in pride, and he died as a leper. And he saw Yahuwah sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the hekel. So this is the language of the priesthood, because the train of his robe filling the temple is of the priesthood. All right, so that's how I understand that Yahuwah is trying to show here, to his people, that he is the actual king and he's going to come soon. All right, and this is the setting, this is the turning point that I'm talking about, in the death of Uzziah. So the earthly king dies, heavenly king is revealed. This becomes a major theological theme of Isaiah. Human monarchy declines, divine kingship rises. Then begins the vassal king period. So after Uzziah, all right, his son, is seated on the throne, and his name is Yotam. Okay, Yotam is a righteous king. Okay, and let me just check this. Oh, I'm in the wrong chapter. 1 second. Second Kings chapter 15:37. So this is the verse, Second Kings 15:32. In the second year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, sovereign of Yasharel, Yotam, son of Uzziah, sovereign of Yahudah, began to reign. Okay, so this is the verse which shows that Yotam began to reign. Okay, now what happened in the days of Yotam? So if you read Second Kings 15:37 and 38, all right, you will see what will happen over here. It says that in those days Yahuwah began to send Retzin, sovereign of Aram, and Pekah, son of Ramaliahu, against Yahudah. So Yotam slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David his father, and Achaz his son reigned in his place. So these attacks, all right, the decline, the sharp decline of the Yahudah kings happened during the last days of Yotam, all right, when Yahuah started sending Retzin, sovereign of Aram, and Pekah, son of Ramaliahu, against Yahudah. Now you will say that Yotam was a righteous king, Uzziah who was a righteous king, then why would Yahuah do that? So it is, obvious that, like I said, we need to go back to the historical perspective that, Yasharel, they asked for kings, right? It was not in Yahuwah's plan to give them kings. They demanded a king, and obviously, kings, some are righteous and some are in evil. So, but Yahuwah has to keep his purpose, and the purpose of Yahuwah was that he himself will come as the Melchizedek priest and king, as Yahusha HaMashiach. So, he has to allow the decline of the monarchy in Yasharel as well as in Yahudah. So it happened in Yasharel; they were carried away captive by the uh, Assyrian king, and even in Yahudah it happened. All right, we are seeing it in these passages. So these attacks occurred during Akaz's reign. This marks the beginning of Yahudah's political subjection, subjugation. I'm sorry. Akaz becomes dependent on Assyria for protection. So Yahudah moves from independent kingdom to a vassal state. Now, vassal state, the word meaning of vassal is that a king, is under a bigger king, all right, and is paying tribute to him through gold, silver, and through money, or or through goods, all right, so that he receives protection from the bigger king. All right, this is the vassal state that the Yahudah monarchy entered into. So this is a major historical shift behind Isaiah's warning. The Assyrian threat in Isaiah's lifetime. During Isaiah's ministry, Assyria becomes the dominant empire. Northern Yasharel falls in 722 BC. Yahudah survives but becomes weakened. Isaiah speaks into this crisis repeatedly. Trust in Yahuwah, not in foreign alliances. Hezekiah later faces the Assyrian siege under Sennacherib. Jerusalem is spared, reinforcing the idea that Yahuwah himself defends the city. The future shift Babylon foretold. Although Assyria was the immediate threat, Isaiah prophetically speaks ahead to Babylon, and Isaiah chapter 39, verses 6 and 7, records the visit of Babylonian envoys. So Isaiah warns that Yahudah will one day go into Babylonian captivity. This is centuries before the exile actually happens. So these are the two verses. Isaiah chapter 39, verses 6 and 7. See, the days are coming when all that is in your house and what your fathers have stored up until this day shall be taken away to Babel. Not a matter shall be left, declares Yahuwah. And they shall take some of your sons who are born to you, whom you bring forth, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the sovereign of Babel. Okay, so this is the prophecy of Isaiah and the unique prophecy of Cyrus. So when you read Isaiah 44 verses 28 and 45 verses 1, it says, who is saying of Cyrus, he is my shepherd and he completes all my pleasure, even saying to Jerusalem, let her be built, and to the Hekel, let a foundation be laid. 45 verses 1. Thus said Yahuwah to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have strengthened to subdue nations before him, and ungird the loins of sovereigns, to open before him the double doors, so that gates are not shut. So Cyrus is named directly. This is historically remarkable because Cyrus lived about 150 years after Isaiah. He becomes the Persian emperor who defeats Babylon and allows the Jews to return. So Yahuwah calls him by name 150 years before even Cyrus would have been born. All right, so you can imagine, how deep this is. So Isaiah presents Cyrus as a chosen instrument of Yahuwah, a deliverer figure for the exiles. This places the second half of Isaiah in an exile or return framework. So if you can see over here, Yahuwah's purpose is already established. All right. when we read these scriptures, to understand that his purpose was to, for Yasharel and Yahudah to acknowledge that there is no king but Yahuah himself. All right. So, the broader theological movement in Isaiah across the book, a pattern emerges: decline of earthly kings, judgment on Yahudah, exile foretold, return promised, a coming righteous ruler introduced. So, the monarchy theme shifts from Davidic kings on earth towards a future ideal ruler, towards divine kingship itself. This is why Isaiah repeatedly speaks of a child to be born, a branch, a servant, a ruler whose reign is eternal. The political collapse of Yahudah becomes the backdrop for a new kind of kingship. Why this matters for the servant songs? The historical context explains why Isaiah begins speaking about a faithful servant, a righteous representative, a restorer of Yasharel, a light to the nations. Because historically the kings were falling, the nation was failing, foreign domination was rising. So the text moves from national kingship to divine intervention, a coming figure who embodies Yasharal's role. Now, the historical background of the servant songs. The scholars, Jewish and Christian alike, identify four primary servant songs in Deuteronomy, Isaiah, which is Isaiah 40 to 55, written in the Babylonian exile period, around 540 BCE. And it is from Isaiah 42 1 to 9, Isaiah 49 1 to 13, Isaiah 54 to 11, Isaiah 52 verses 13 to Isaiah 53 verses 12. So the historical tension inside the text is Yasharel is equal to the servant, which is a national identity, but the servant also restores Yasharel. Okay, so this is the historical tension inside the text. So this creates an internal grammatical paradox, because a servant who is called Yasharel yet saves Yasharel, suffers innocently, bears sin, brings covenant to nations. This is not normal national language. So this is why early Jewish interpretation, pre-medieval, often allowed for a messianic reading. Only later rabbinic tradition systematized the national interpretation, which is a collective reading, as I spoke about. Rabbi, Tobiah Singer, all right, is from the rabbinic tradition, the current rabbinic tradition, who has switched to the national interpretation or collective reading of the servant, saying that Yasharel is equal to the servant, which is a national identity, because they refuse and reject the Messiah. So Isaiah 40 verses 55, spoken into the Babylonian exile period. Yasharel at this time is defeated, scattered, spiritually compromised, politically powerless. So in these chapters, the word servant, abed, is used in two ways: Yasharel as a nation, and second, a distinct servant figure who restores Yasharel. So this dual usage is not accidental. It is a literary and grammatical tension built into the text. So this tension is the doorway to the representation reading. So the baseline, Yasharel clearly called a servant. So there are verses Jewish interpreters begin with. Isaiah chapter 41 verses 8. It says, "You, Yasharel, are my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the descendants of Abraham who love me." All right, this is the verse in Hebrew. Okay, and what we are going to look at is, "Vi atha Yasharel abdi." You, Yasharel, are my servant. Translated as, "You, Yasharel, are my servant." So the word abdi is my servant, which is a singular noun. And with the vowel points, they say it as avdi. All right, the verb avdi. Yasharel, collective nation treated as singular. Okay, and when we read Isaiah chapter 41 verses 1, it says, "Hear, O Jacob, my servant, and Yasharel, whom I have chosen." All right, so vi atha shema Jacob abdi. Hear, Jacob, my servant. Again, we see here Jacob is equal to Yasharal. We know that Jacob was named as Yasharal, isn't it? After he wrestled with that the messenger of Yahuah. Okay, servant is equal to nation, singular grammar used for collective identity. So this is where we need to understand. All right, singular grammar used for a collective identity representing a nation. Jacob represents the entire nation because the entire nation came from his loins. All right, when it says my servant, all right, which is Abdi in Hebrew, my servant, singular noun, okay, collective nation treated as singular, which is Yasharal. So it's because it is speaking to Yasharal. So Isaiah 44 verses 21, remember these matters, O Jacob and Yasharal, for you are my servant. I have formed you. You are my servant, O Yasharal. Do not forget me. All right. So this is again in Hebrew over here, which says Zekar ele Jacob ve Yasharal ki abdi atha. Yasharal, for you are my servant. Alright, important grammatical foundation. A nation can be spoken of as one person. This is standard Hebrew collective singular. This is not debated. Alright, so I agree that it is talking about one person. Yasharal as one person. Okay, the shift. A servant distinct from Yasharal appears. Now, suddenly, a servant distinct from Yasharal appears. Now the grammar begins to separate the servant from Yasharal. So this is the turning point, right, where the Jewish rabbis refuse to accept, because when you read Isaiah chapter 42 verses 1, it says, behold my servant, I uphold him, my chosen one, my being has delighted in, I have put my spirit upon him, he brings forth right ruling to the nations. Again, this is the verse in Hebrew. I have listed it here. Hen abdi atmak bo. All right, behold my servant, I uphold him. So if you see the word bo, it means in him. All right, which is a singular masculine pronoun. And natati ruki alav. I have put my spirit upon him. The word alav, upon him, is singular. All right. So, Mishpat Lagoim Yotsi, he will bring justice to the nation. So, the grammatical point here is an unbroken singular personal pronoun flow, like him, he, upon him, he will bring. So, but contrast with Yasharal's description nearby, when you come down the verses in Isaiah chapter 42, verses 18 to 19, it says, hear you deaf, and look you blind, and see. Verse 19, who is blind but my servant, or deaf as my messenger, whom I send? Who is blind as he who is at peace, and blind as a servant of Yahuah? All right. Again, I've listed the verses in Hebrew over here. Mi iver ki im abdi, who is blind but my servant. Here, servant is Yasharal, which is the nation. So, chapter 42 of Isaiah presents two servant profiles. All right. The one profile we saw over here. Behold, my servant, I uphold him, my chosen one, my being has delighted in. I have put my spirit upon him. He brings forth right ruling to the nation. So here, this servant is covenantal, and one who is uh, upheld. Okay, and the second servant over here is one who's blind, deaf, and failing. So, servant A is spirit filled, obedient, brings justice. Servant B, blind, deaf, failing. Same title, two grammatical portraits by Isaiah. Okay, so we need to identify the Hebrew grammar and distinguish, all right, because one is a representation, all right, who embodies Yasharal and takes their punishment upon himself, who is servant A, and servant B is the nation itself, who is blind, deaf, failing. I was surprised that in one of the debates, the Rabbi Tobiah Singer is saying that, Christianity or Messianics, they present, themselves as unable to save themselves. They need a savior, whereas he says that the Jewish perspective is different. The Jewish perspective is that you are able to save yourself. all right, when you approach Yahuah through sacrifice. All right. But what sacrifice? I'm not sure, because they refuse Messiah. So obviously they are talking about animal sacrifices. So if I ever get an opportunity to write to him, I will definitely do so. All right, because the question, uh, he will be questioned, and he has to give an answer to this, as to, it's been 2000 years since there are no animal sacrifices in Yasharel. All right. uh, and in 1948, Israel, or the nation, is formed. Still there are no sacrifices, no temple, no sacrifices. So who is atoning for them? How can they approach Yahuah, all right, without atonement? So that is, and there are certain Jews who say that no, there is a yearly heifer which is sacrificed. It's all speaking in the air. There is no altar there, no sacrifices. They just go to the wailing wall and they weep, and uh, not weep, you can say they lament. If you see in the videos, they lament at the wailing wall. I don't know what they pray over there, but obviously they are praying for a third temple. Okay, so coming back to the text, so this signals representation structure, because one servant fails, that is Yasharal as a nation, another fulfills the embodiment of Yasharal, who is Yahushua HaMashiach. Isaiah chapter 42, verses 6, a person given as a covenant. I'll read out the verse. I, Yahuah, have called you in righteousness, and I strengthen your hand and guard you, and give you for a covenant to a people, for a light to the nations. Again, I've listed the verse in Hebrew. All right. Ve et nekha livritam. I will give you as a covenant of the people. All right. Livrid. Actually, it is Brit. There they say it as livrid, because Brit means covenant. Okay, I've listed it here. Brit means covenant, and ethneka means I will give you, a singular direct object. So the grammatical inference is Yasharal receives covenant, but here servant is given as covenant. This is identity embodiment language, a role borne by an individual. So if you see over here this verse, it says, I will give you a covenant to the people. So how can the nation be given to the nation as a covenant? So this is where they don't understand the grammar over here, where it talks about representation as well as collective together, because the representation is given as a covenant, all right, to the collective, who are the people. Isaiah chapter 49, the central grammatical key. This is the most decisive section in the entire debate, because verse 3 says, and he said to me, you are my servant, O Yasharel, in whom I am adorned. Again, I've listed this in Hebrew. Okay. Ba yomer li abdi ata Yasharel. He said to me, you are my servant, Yasharel. The Jewish argument is servant is equal to nation. Now let's read verse 5 carefully. Alright, it says, and now said Yahuah, who formed me from the womb to be his servant, to bring Yaakov back to him, and Yasharel be gathered to him. Yet I am esteemed in the eyes of Yahuah, and my Elohim has been my strength. Again, I've listed Isaiah 49 verses 5 in Hebrew. Lehashiv Yaakov Elav, to restore Yaakov to him. Lehashib means to bring back or restore. Ve Yasharel lo ye asef means and Yasharel be gathered to him. So the grammatical impossibility is that servant is equal to Yasharel but restores Yasharel. Can you see this? It would be so absurd to say that Yasharel is restoring themselves. And no wonder Rabbi Toby Singer, says that, oh, Yasharel is in a position to restore themselves before Yahuah. How fake that can be, because if that was true, then Yahuah would have never sent them into captivity, into exile. So till date, at least till 1948, they were all in exile. All right, right from 2,000 years, almost 2,000 years, they were in exile, isn't it? How can he say that, in those 2,000 years, was there not a single rabbi from among them who could restore Yasharel back to Yahuah in those days? And still there is no rabbi who can build a temple. They got all the wealth of the world, all right. Can't they build a temple and start the animal sacrifices, which they are planning as of now? Why didn't they do it before? Why are they sitting quiet since 1948 and fighting all the Muslims all around them, where he denies, he says that when his Messiah will come, he says there will be peace all around, there will be no more fighting. Okay, so they are looking for a political Messiah. That is the main problem with them, and that's the reason they reject the representation, the embodiment of Yahusha as a representative of Yasharel. And that's the reason they rejected him back then as well, because they were looking for a political Messiah to deliver them from the Roman authority back then. So, grammatical impossibility: a servant is equal to Yasharel but restores Yasharel. This only works if Yasharel, whose name is the identity title, Yasharel as object, is equal to nation. So, exactly like Jacob, one man, Yasharel, nation from him. So, here servant is called Yasharel but functions as a representative of Yasharel. This is pure Hebrew identity transfer logic. All right. So Isaiah 49 verses 6, the global role of the servant. Isaiah 49 verses 6 says, and he says, shall it be a small matter for you to be my servant, to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to bring back the preserved ones of Yasharel? And I shall give you as a light to the nations, to be my deliverance to the ends of the earth. All right. Again, I've listed this in Hebrew. All right. It says, Ve natati ka leor goim. I will give you as a light to the nations. Netati ka means I will give you. It's singular. Again, singular, mission bearer, plural word, impact. All right. What does it say? I will give you as a light to the nations. All right, I will give you. There is some representation, all right, going to be given as a light to the nations, all right, because he represents Yasharel. So it's a singular mission bearer, plural word, impact. Isaiah 50, the servant speaks personally. This is the first person singular speech. Verse 6, Isaiah 56, it says, I gave my back to those who strike, and my cheeks to those who pulled out the beard. I did not hide my face from humiliation and spitting. Again, I've listed the verse in Hebrew. All right, it says, Gevi, Natati, Lemakim. My back I gave to those who strike. Natati means I gave, which is the first person singular. Belekhai, Lemortim. My cheeks to those who pull out the beard. This is autobiographical suffering, not national description. A nation does not speak as I gave my back. Only now does Isaiah 52 to 53 continue the same servant. The same singular grammar continues. It says in Isaiah 52 verses 13, see, my servant shall work wisely, he shall be exalted and lifted up very high. Again, I've listed this verse in Hebrew. Hine yaskil abdi, which means behold, my servant will prosper or act wisely. Verse 4, truly he bore our sicknesses and carried our pains, yet we reckoned him smitten, stricken by Elohim and afflicted. Alright, the word nasa over here, I've listed this here. If you can see, I've highlighted this. Nasa means he bore. So he bore our sicknesses. It's in singular. Alright, but verse 5 says, but he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our crookednesses. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. Alright, the word meduka, he was crushed, translated as he was crushed, again is in the singular. Alright, verse 11, Isaiah 53 verse 11, he will see the result of the suffering of his life, and be satisfied. Through his knowledge, my righteous servant makes many righteous, and he bears their crookedness. Alright, the word yire I've highlighted over here in the Hebrew text, which I've pasted. Yire means he will see. Same servant introduced earlier, same singular identity. All right, a representation. So the complete grammatical arc across all songs is Isaiah 41 to 44. The servant is equal to Yasharel, collective singular. Isaiah 42, servant is equal to ideal obedient figure, again singular. Isaiah 49, servant is equal to called Yasharel but restores Yasharel. Alright, it is impossible, like I said, for Yasharel to restore Yasharel. Alright, doesn't make sense. There has to be a representation. Isaiah 50, servant is equal to individual speaker. Isaiah 52 to 53, servant, suffering, righteous individual. All speaking about a collective singular, a representation, alright, who is representing the nation. So this creates a grammatical progression. Yasharel as a nation, servant named Yasharel, servant distinct from Yasharel, servant restores Yasharel, servant suffers for many. This is the representation structure emerging naturally. The strongest purely Hebrew argument in Isaiah chapter 49, the servant is called Yasharel, but then restores Yasharel. This is grammatically impossible if Yasharel means the nation. So Yasharel, there must be a title carried by one representative person to do that. So this argument is linguistic, internal, hard to dismiss. What the representation reading actually means, not Yasharel is replaced. Alright, it's not that Yasharel is replaced, but Yasharel is embodied. So that is where we need to draw the line. Yasharel is never replaced. So we have certain people saying that Yahuah has divorced Yasharel among the messianic circles. Alright, they say that Yahuah has divorced Yasharel and now it's new covenant. The bride is new from the Gentiles. Not at all. Yasharel was not replaced. Yasharel was embodied. So all those who confess Yahushua HaMashiach, all right, as their representation, all right, who has taken, our sins upon himself, all right, acknowledge this are part of Yasharel because they are clinging and they are part of the body of Mashiach, who is Yasharel embodied. I hope this makes sense. Just as one man contained the nation's identity, all right, Yaakov became Yasharel. All right, Yaakov became Yasharel. So one man contained the nation's identity. All right, and it says that when it talks about Abraham, I'm reminded it says Levi was still in his loins when he met Melchizedek, and Abraham gave tenth of all the spoils to him. So one man contained, all right, the priesthood within himself. So that also is a picture. So now servant carries Yasharel's name, restores the nation. So in summary, this study traces the servant theme in Isaiah from its historical roots to its grammatical development across the book. It begins with the national identity of Yasharel as Yahuwah's servant, then follows how the text gradually presents a distinct servant figure who restores, speaks, suffers, and acts on behalf of the people. Rather than isolating one passage, the entire arc of Isaiah is examined to understand how the servant language evolves and what role this figure plays within the prophet's message. So it is very important to understand the historical perspective of Isaiah, all right, where he stood among which kings, all right, and how there was a paradigm shift because it moved from Yotham, who was the last king, all right, in a sense, who was independent. All right, after that, they were all vassal kings, including Hezekiah. I was surprised when I read Hezekiah was a righteous king, but yet he feared the king of Assyria and stripped the gold, and the silver from Yahuah's treasury and from the temple and gave it to him as a tribute to just to keep him away from attacking him, or to attacking Yahudah. So if this shows us that, all right, there was a morally, all right, even the righteous kings, they understood that, all right, there is a decline happening, and that fear was in them of losing their kingship. All right, so I'll cover that in some other topic in detail about the 10 kings. All right, but I hope this study makes sense, and feel free to leave a comment. Uh, and if you have any questions, you can note it down in the comments, and I will be glad to reply. May Yahusha Barak you. Shalom.